seems like sometimes in our world, things just seem to be getting more and more difficult. And so today I'm going to be talking about one of those things that can occur when life gets more difficult, and that is vicarious trauma. Hi, I'm Kim Long, and I'm with Doja Psychological Services in Spruce Grove, Alberta. In a previous video, we've talked about compassion fatigue and what that is, and it relates to the topic that we're talking about today. So if you haven't already done so, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button or the like button, and it will keep track of this video for you and hopefully open up the compassion fatigue video for you as well. But today we're talking about vicarious trauma, and that is a little bit different than compassion fatigue, although the two are related. So vicarious trauma is where our worldview or our fundamental beliefs about the world can change as a result of being repeatedly exposed to traumatic information. So it doesn't have to be something that happened to us directly. It can and often occurs because of stories we hear about traumatizing experiences. So what I mean about a change in worldview is, for example, maybe somebody who works with domestic violence survivors no longer believes that a relationship can be healthy as a result of their work in that field, whereas before they may have believed that no, there are healthy relationships out there. So that would be an example of vicarious trauma. By hearing the stories about domestic abuse, that person can no longer believe in the capability of a relationship being healthy. And as a result, symptoms of PTSD can actually occur. So flashbacks, intrusive images and thoughts, that change in worldview, perhaps even suicidal ideation and hopelessness. It can occur in anyone who is deeply impacted by the stories they hear. So, you know, many of us will think of the usual suspects in that. Police officers, first responders, military, psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors. But there are also people who maybe we don't think of. People that work in animal shelters, or people that report on the news or report on news events. It can even happen from listening to friends who have experienced significant traumatic events in their lives. And if you're deeply impacted by those stories, you can experience vicarious trauma as a result. So in an article put out by Canadian Nurse, written by Françoise Mathieu, called Occupational Hazards, Compassion Fatigue, Vicarious Trauma, and Burnout. And again, we've talked about compassion fatigue in a previous video, so I'm not really going to get into it here. But the article directly hints at a link between compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. And so I quote, "Of course, healthcare workers can develop all three conditions: compassion fatigue due to exposure to a high volume of patients, secondary traumatic stress, or vicarious trauma, because of the stories they hear, and burnout as a result of an unhealthy workplace. In the real world, the distinction is not always perfectly clear." So what that basically means is that you can have compassion fatigue on its own, you can have vicarious trauma on its own, and you can have burnout on its own, but there is overlap between the three. And where I kind of see the overlap is that if you're experiencing compassion fatigue because you're seeing a high number of people that are struggling, and you know, you're draining your emotional resources of compassion, then that makes you highly susceptible to vicarious trauma, because you are reacting to their stories and you're hearing a lot more stories because you're exposed to that high volume of people. So those are two things that can often go hand in hand, and that's kind of the connection. So stay tuned for a future video using mindfulness-based stress reduction. I had to look at my cheat sheet there because it's totally blanked. But mindfulness-based stress reduction activity or strategy that can be used to help with vicarious trauma. Along with that, other ways to prevent vicarious trauma would be to, of course, build that support network and reach out to that support network. also limiting your exposure to traumatic stress. So for example, you know, many of my clients I think kind of laugh at me because I don't watch the news anymore. I cannot watch the news and do this job. Same thing with social media. I'm pretty careful about what I take in. A great Buddhist monk actually once said that the communication we ingest is the same as ingesting food, so we have to think about what poison is going into our body. So don't hesitate to limit your exposure to traumatic stress. So those are two other strategies. We will look at mindfulness-based stress reduction. And as always, please, if you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button below or the like button below. And until next time, please take care of yourselves. These are hard times, and we will get through it together. Okay, bye for now.